Mesdames, Mesdemoiselles, good morning and welcome to Morning Bell edition of October the 9th, 2012. I'm Datuk Nik Izzah Nik Bolia. Here in the studio today, we have Mr. Martin Wong as a guest, a special guest that we have every Tuesday.
Nice to see
now,
you.
without further ado, let's start on the story for today. We're covering about three major stories today, which is Maybank raises 3.66 billion via placement. And then we'll talk about the fast action required for CPO market. And then we also will talk about the SEG unveiling two new guidelines regarding stockbroking. Okay, story one. Maybank raises 3.66 billion via private placement. Malaysian banking berhad Maybank said it raised 3.66 billion through a private placement of new shares, the largest ever, to support its growth in the region, prompting some analysts to speculate that it may be keen to bid for a stake in the Thailand Bank of Ayodhya, Bay. Now, Maybank said the funds raised is for its working capital, but we suspect it could be used to bid for General Electric 25.3% stake in Bay, worth in the region of about US 1.7 billion, which is translated to about 5.2 billion Malaysian ringgit, said an analyst from the Hong Leong Investment Bank. Now, Martin, is this really the biggest private placement ever dealt in Malaysia?
I would think it is. It seems to be currently Malaysia everything is going big. You know, we just have the free IPOs, the IH, the FGV, and so everything is big in Malaysia. That seems to be the flavor in here. And I think banking on that too, with the rest of the world, equity markets are really falling or depressing, and they have been primed by the central banks. This is the region you want to be, and I think this is also a good move, taking advantage, you know, with the IPOs and to do a private placement, which is on time now with the Maybank. To me, it's a bit like an IPO for the new Maybank image, you know, ever since it took original steps.
Now, what interesting point about this placement is, amidst the new budget that came through, yes, and the market has been quite vibrant in the past, and there's a big market rally in New York for last Friday.
That's right.
Now, Maybank wanted to issue at first 300 million shares, but then it ended up with 412 shares. Now, the bulk of this placement is going to the local fund manager, about 70%. The other 30% going to foreign. Now, which you think the local fund manager will be very, very keen to hold this blue chip stock?
Now, this is actually what I've gathered has been EPF and some of the government institutional. Not surprised in this case, EPF or Khazanah holding. And I understand too, it does pay a good yield of 8% dividend yield, right? The only thing I'm very surprised is that there is not so much foreign participation in here. As I know, there's only 30%. I would think the foreigner will be more. At 8% yield, where can you get it? Right? In Australia, they just had last week an interest rate cut to 3.25 or 25 basis down. There isn't much in Singapore. Interest rates are below 6%. This is a very attractive view.
But if you look at in the past, let's say 10 years ago, the dividend declaration in Malaysian company are very minuscule. You're talking about 2-3%.
Exactly.
Now, only quite of late that it has been increased to 8%. Now, what drives the market to go for higher yield?
I think supposedly this is also a trend that we're seeing globally. What's happening in the world, there is not much growth, you know, other than the emerging market. You may heard that the BRIC is over, and the MIS, I call it the ASEAN MIS. BRIC stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and those are emerging markets. So the new ASEAN MIS stands for, you know, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, and maybe we are also including Philippines. So there are growth in here. So people are looking growth, will definitely have to invest this part of the country, and to bring the foreign funds in to create some sort of a investment environment with a brand name like Maybank, 8% yield. I think that's to bring these guys in.
No, Maybank, if you look at the history of Maybank, it's been quite active in the region before the CIMB start taking the role to be an Asian player. Now, CIMB has quite successfully have a footprint in all over Southeast Asian country with the recent purchase earlier this year of the Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS.
That's right. RBS.
Now, Maybank has got its footprint in most of the country in the region except Thailand.
That's right.
So do you think, how true is this speculation that they're really looking to Thailand?
I think there is, in order to extend its footprint, I think Thailand you have to go in. I mean, looking at Thailand has a population of 75 million,
Yes.
right? And I believe with the GDP growth around 5 to 6% at that. So it does has provide a growth in there. Now, don't forget, Thailand is also considered as the East Detroit, where the
For
automakers
assembly
is
plants.
so with a lot of car coming in, there is going to be a lot of growth in there, and Maybank cannot miss out this opportunity too.
But predominantly, Thailand is still a very agricultural-based country. Their resources not as rich as what Malaysia, with our oils, our timber, with
That's
our
right.
oil palm. Now, how do Thailand actually can sustain its economic power
Now, don't forget, Thailand is actually moving
with
from,
that kind of population? I mean,
yes, by right or not, Thailand will eventually have to move from agricultural to manufacturing. With a large base in, they don't have the problems that Malaysia has, which is labor shortage. I mean, you go to any manufacturing that you have, you will get a lot of foreign workers. It's very hard to find, Malaysians working in factories or in manufacturing. So Thailand may not have that problem, so that seems to be good. But also at the same time, Thailand is also focusing on the agriculture, going to the scientific, more biotech. I think every country has to do whatever is necessary.
but the majority of Thais do not speak English. How would they have to compete with Malaysia?
That's true. That's why they will have to be, remember, Thailand will just need to do its manufacturing base. You don't really need, look at China. Not everybody speaks English, but yet they're one of the largest manufacturers because they seems to be OEM.
Okay.
For that, that's
So
how I see.
that should be the secret for Thai to
Yeah.
expand itself.
Maybank has to expand its footprint. I think in a way, if I'm a Maybank CEO and if CIMB is doing all this expanding, I got to play catch up too. So that's I think behind the mind of a CEO for any banks. You have to be big, like it or not, banks.
Okay, so if both the big bank in Malaysia, both are GLC linked, you know what's my question, the line of questions coming through now.
Yes.
Now, wouldn't it be better if we merge Maybank and CIMB in order to have that present in the region?
Now, like
Don't you think
Yes.
that would be a prudent way of doing it?
I think from a prudent way, it is. From an economic standpoint, yes, you get that economic of scale. But however, from a political standpoint as well, from a consumer standpoint, it's always good to have two competing banks where you get the best deal. Because from an economic, anything that's been monopolized, at the end of the day, the consumer always get the short end of the stick. So from a political standpoint also, you can say, look, we have two bodies in there. There's enough for everybody. There's enough jobs for everybody. That's why we have two banks.
Well, then you're talking about these two are both GLC. Maybe the competition should exist between the GLC and non-GLC,
Exactly.
such as maybe RHB is still considered GLC in certain part because
Yes, it is.
EPF has quite a majority stake in it. So maybe we should look at Hong Leong Bank and Public Bank merge in to be a very vital force to compete
Yes.
with the joint of Maybank and CIMB.
I think it
now,
is.
Don't you think that would be really great competition?
It is. I think banks have to merge. If you look back, I think in the 1970s, I recall there was about 60 over banks, and over the years there's been real consolidation, and there's really a need to make our banks strong and compete on. Because I think there's also from a Bank Negara side, the capital market, that's some blueprint in there to really make having foreigners coming in there. So our banks need to be strong to compete with them.
Okay, talking about this, I believe the placement was done at $8.88 when the market is trading about $8.94, 95.
That's right.
Now there's a slight discount to it. Now, is it necessary for Maybank to do this placement? I believe the placement is done through Maybank Security itself.
That's right.
So this is one of the biggest private placement that's being done in the country, and why there should be a discount to the market?
Well, just like it or not, if you treat this like an IPO, then the logic makes a lot of sense. Okay, like in any IPO, we were talking with the Raj a couple of weeks ago about all IPOs. Now in Malaysia, like unlike the Western or US country, we tend to felt that if you want to buy today, we will give you a discount, and generally it's about 10 to 12% kind of rates that we're talking about. So a discount is always being given out, so to attract more people to have it. So it tends to be priced lower. I suppose that's just a way of doing business in this part of the country.
Now, when we're talking about looking at overseas expansion, Maybank, do they really require approval from Bank Negara?
I think what's more important in here is the shareholders. I think the shareholders need to be approved, including the minority shareholder. Eventually, that, like it or not, Maybank is a GLC. If that is already internally approved by the governments, so it's just basically just getting a sort of like a chop from Bank Negara. That's about it.
But the question I'm asking is because eventually, if Maybank and CIMB start doing all this footprint all over Southeast Asia region, acquiring asset, it will come to a point the foreign assets out of Malaysia is more than the local. There is a possibility in the long run.
Yes, I agree with you.
So when that comes, how would Bank Negara trying to tackle this issue?
I mean, there's the same way too. I think in Malaysia, Bank Negara will probably take a look and see opinion rule. I mean, if you look back, we were talking about gold scam in Geneva. I mean, that's a very good example.
Well, the gold scam is never a gold trading company.
Yes,
anyway,
it is. But what I'm trying to say, back in 2010, Geneva was actually investigated. Bank Negara went in, investigated, but it let it flow through. I mean, the business flow. I think that would be the same with also what's happening with Bank Negara today. Let's see how it is, and then when we get to it, we probably do something about it.
That's interesting. Now, you are a specialist in capital markets, so to speak. Are you dealing in any commodity with your clients as well?
Commodities, mainly precious metal.
Precious metal alone, which is gold, silver?
Yes, gold and silver.
Platinum to certain extent?
Yes,
or you
to
don't
a certain
trade
extent. Mainly in exchange traded funds backed by physical.
Okay. So, is the futures market in the gold very active in Malaysia?
The futures market currently is still under the CME group, which is traded out from the Chicago side, and there you can also get gold trading stocks through the Singapore
London Metal Exchange.
No, through Singapore Stock Exchange, which is
Okay.
under the, I believe not mistaken, it's under the S&P Spider groups in there. You can also do the spot, which is the physical through the London Metal Exchange. So there's many ways of doing it too in Malaysia.
So, if there are 3 exchanges that are dealing in gold currently, there must be an opportunity for arbitrage.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so how big are the arbitrage in the markets at the moment?
I don't have any figures with me, but I do believe that the amount is very big. Now, like it or not, the precious metal in the world currently is all currently, like it or not, I hate to use that word, is manipulated. Who goes into it? The central banks. You know, you will see JP Morgan.
Surely central banks are not ruled to be a
Well, that's right, but
speculator in the market.
they are not, but they do it through their agents, like
Okay.
JP Morgan, right? JP Morgan has been an agent. You can also find it on the news, how they corner up the silver market. And there's a lot of sort of called reports, but none, the CFTC in which take care of the commodity, nothing has been done about it too. But then again, that's another topic we can talk about.
Now, coming back to the Maybank placement, with this huge placement of 3.66 billion, that's a massive amount.
Yes.
If they were to buy the bank, let's assume we're speculating on this idea, they're buying the bank of Ayodhya in Thailand, the price would be about 5.2 billion. So the difference will be what, they're going to issue a bond, or is it from internally generated funds? Because they still have their CAR ratio and the bezel to
Yes.
add it to. So how would the bank, this is just a speculation that is, how do you think the bank is going to finance the difference of 5.2 to 3.6?
It's going to be a mixture of internal funds as well as equity at this stage. Whatever I've gathered so far, it's has been very sketchy in there. And like it or not, I never liked banks as a sector for my investor. As an investor, I tend to look at companies that tend to be very conservative. I'm a conservative investor. I look for recurring incomes. I look at things that people need to eat, need to consume, and those are consumer sectors, which is to me are much more stable, right? That provide cash flows too. And banks, like it or not, I'm not talking about the Malaysian banks, but if you look back at the history, what has been seen in US, a lot of banks over leverage. And when the crunch time comes, that's where you see a lot of downfall.
But as I understood it, in banking circles, about 1/3 of the income are from the interest earning.
Yes.
The other 1/3 income is from the fees they charge.
Yes, investment
The
advisory.
investment fees,
Yes.
advisory, transaction fee, and all the handling fees. The other 1/3 come from trading or proprietary trading of the money market, which is a treasury role, very important
Yes.
part. Now, there's also a drive for Malaysian banks to increase the fee, chargeable fee, to be a higher, which means there must be some inroad for a revenue stream coming from the private placements, like this kind of thing, and also for corporate finance, for the corporate financing of the investment bank. Now, how effective is Maybank now, you think, achieving these targets?
I think ever since Maybank has started their investment services side, they are getting into it. You can see if you go to focus all this time on interest income, which is actually depending on loan growth.
Loan growth and the deposits.
Those are probably dependent on economic. If you look, if the GDP growth each year is going to be growing, well, then you will see interest income are growing. That's more what has been a public bank main focus is if you look at public bank. But for the Maybank now with this new strategy like what we talk about, going for placement fees, which is traditionally all this while a lot of the business has been going, bulk of it goes to CIMB. So Maybank is now looking at this as a new source of revenue.
Well, the big IPOs that are coming up in the country.
Yeah, has always been CIMB banks.
Well, how would you conclude this placement? What does it really means to Maybank?
I think this is more of building up their war chest. They need money, they're expanding, and they want to make sure they have adequate fundings, be ready to either do any acquisition or to satisfy a higher capital requirement under the Basel III Accords. So this is good to me, right? And also they do promise to pay a decent yield, around a 6 to 8% yield. So that is why a lot of analysts in towns like Maybank now for what it is.
I think it's a very prudent move from Maybank, and I do concur with your concept on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any idea on this Maybank placement, would you please tweet or email to us at capitaltv.com.my, and we should go for a short break. We'll come back for the second story.